The long stretches of Texas highway could make a man feel like he was the only soul alive on Earth. Dust storms swirled across the cracked asphalt, the neon signs of long-dead motels flickering faintly like ghosts refusing to die. On one such lonely highway sat Evelyn's Diner, a squat, chrome-sided building that looked frozen in the 1950s. Its flickering red neon sign spelled out EATS, half burned out so it now read simply EAT. Truckers knew it. Drifters knew it. Even the occasional tourist, lost on the backroads of Texas, would stumble across it late at night when there were no other lights for miles. It was the only place in a 50-mile radius that promised hot coffee, greasy burgers, and the illusion of company on the open road. But if you asked the locals, those who dared whisper about it, they'd tell you not to be inside Evelyn's Diner when the clock struck midnight. Not because of the food, not because of the coffee, but because of what happened to the people sitting inside once the hands on the old wall clock touched 12. The story had been around for decades, but no one could say for sure when it began. Some swore it started in the 1970s when the original owner, Evelyn Me Carter, was found dead in the diner's kitchen, her eyes wide open, her face twisted in terror, and every single customer from that night gone without a trace. Plates of food had been left on the tables, burgers with bites missing, coffee cups half full, forks resting against pancakes, but the people who had been eating them vanished as though they had never existed. Others said it went back further, to the diner's very foundation. That the land itself was cursed, once the site of a bloody massacre during the early days of Texas settlement. They claimed the ground remembered, and every night at midnight it took back what it was owed. Most people brushed it off as nothing more than small-town legend. A ghost story to keep kids out of trouble, a tale to scare tourists, a bit of folklore that gave the town of Dry Creek, Texas, its only claim to fame. But the missing persons reports were real. They stacked up over the decades, filed in dusty cabinets at the sheriff's office. Tourists, drifters, hitchhikers, sometimes even locals who should have known better. They'd stopped for a meal at Evelyn's, and no one ever saw them again. The strangest part, the diner never closed. Every time the authorities tried to shut it down, to declare it unsafe or demolish it outright, someone would intervene. Paperwork would vanish. Court orders would go missing. Once, in the 1980s, the sheriff himself took a bulldozer to the place. But the very next morning, the diner was standing exactly as it had always been, as though it had never been touched. The sheriff never spoke again about what he saw that night. He retired, left town, and drank himself to death a few years later. So Evelyn's Diner stood, always open, always waiting. And now, it was autumn of 2023, and a young journalist named Claire Mitchell was pulling her beat-up Honda Civic into the gravel lot outside the diner. Claire was chasing a story. She'd been freelancing for online publications for years, clawing her way up from clickbait articles about celebrity diets and UFO sightings, desperate for something big enough to land her a permanent spot at a major magazine. When she'd stumbled across the legend of Evelyn's Diner during a late-night internet rabbit hole, she thought she'd struck gold. Disappearing townsfolk, vanishing tourists, a diner that rebuilt itself overnight. It had everything: true crime, supernatural lore, Americana nostalgia, and horror. The kind of story people couldn't resist clicking on. But Claire wasn't just here for clicks. Her father had grown up not far from Dry Creek, and he'd always told her to stay the hell away from this place. "The diner ain't right, Claire," he'd warn her whenever they drove past the turnoff. Some places in this world just don't belong to us. You don't go pocking your nose where it don't belong. Her father was dead now, but his words stuck with her. And maybe that was why she couldn't resist coming here. It was rebellion, it was curiosity, and it was ambition, all rolled into one. She pushed open the diner's glass door, the little brass bell jingling cheerfully overhead. The smell of coffee, bacon grease, and old linoleum washed over her. A jukebox hummed in the corner, though it wasn't playing. The booths were upholstered in cracked red vinyl, the counter lined with chrome stools. A few truckers sat hunched over plates of food, their eyes fixed on the clock that hung above the register. It was 11:07 p.m. Claire slid into a booth and set down her notebook. A waitress appeared, her name tag reading Linda. She looked tired, worn down, as though she hadn't slept in weeks. "What can I get you, hun?" Linda asked, her voice flat. "Just coffee, black," Claire said. Linda poured her a cup without another word. Claire took a sip, then looked around the diner. She noticed something strange right away. No one was talking. Not the truckers, not the couple at the counter, not even the cook in the back. Everyone seemed to be waiting. Her eyes flicked back up to the clock. 11:08. Claire scribbled in her notebook. Everyone stares at the clock, no one speaks. Fear is palpable. The bell over the door jingled again. A man in a sheriff's uniform stepped in. He was tall, weathered, with a silver mustache and deep lines etched into his face. His nameplate read Sheriff Darnell. He spotted Claire immediately and strode over to her booth. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, his voice heavy with warning. "I'm just writing a story," Claire replied. "I won't be long." He leaned down, his face close to hers. "This ain't a place for stories. This is a place where stories end." Claire's pulse quickened, but she forced a smile. "Then maybe that's the story." The sheriff straightened, shaking his head. He moved to the counter, muttering something to Linda, who gave him a tight, nervous nod. Claire checked her watch. 11:15. The tension in the diner grew thicker, as though every tick of the clock was pulling an invisible thread tighter and tighter around the room. The truckers ate slowly, chewing without enthusiasm. The couple at the counter sipped their sodas like prisoners on death row savoring a last meal. Claire's curiosity burned hotter with every passing minute. She pulled out her phone and started recording. At 11:30, the jukebox crackled to life all on its own. A tinny recording of Patsy Cline's "Crazy" filled the room, scratchy and distorted. No one reacted. They just kept watching the clock. At 11:45, the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The coffee in Claire's cup rippled as though something had walked heavily across the floor, though no one moved. At 11:55, Linda walked to the door and quietly flipped the open sign to closed. Then she locked it, slid the bolt across, and backed away slowly as though afraid to turn her back on it. Claire's chest tightened. She could feel it now, the diner was holding its breath. At 11:59, Sheriff Darnell stood. He looked at the room, his face grim. "It's time," he said softly. The clock ticked once more. Midnight. And then the truckers vanished. The couple at the counter vanished. Even the cook in the back vanished. Plates clattered to the floor, forks dropped onto half-eaten meals, coffee cups spilled across the counter. The jukebox screeched and died. Claire sat frozen, her phone trembling in her hands. She was the only one left, except for Linda and Sheriff Darnell, and both of them were staring at her with eyes that no longer looked human. Claire's breath came in shallow gasps as she stared at the empty booths, the overturned cups, the plates of food still steaming. Only seconds ago the diner had been full, truckers, a young couple, even the cook humming behind the counter. Now all that remained were their meals, half-eaten and abandoned, like ghosts had sat down to dinner and been called away. Her pen slipped from her hand, clattering against the tabletop. Her phone still recorded, the red dot blinking on the screen, but Claire barely registered it. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, to get out, to drive until this place was nothing but a nightmare in her rearview mirror. But she couldn't move, because Linda the waitress and Sheriff Darnell were still there, and their eyes weren't right. They glowed faintly in the neon light, pale and clouded like milk. Their pupils had thinned into narrow slits, reptilian and unblinking. Both of them were staring directly at her. "You shouldn't have stayed," Linda whispered, her voice rasping like dry leaves. Claire's chair screeched as she shoved back, standing too fast. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to meet their gaze. "What happened to them? Where did they go?" Sheriff Darnell stepped closer, his boots echoing heavy on the linoleum floor. "Same place they all go, same place they've always gone." His voice had changed, deeper now, layered with something that didn't belong to a man at all. Claire clutched her phone tighter, holding it out as though it were a weapon. "I'm recording this. People will know what happened here." Linda gave a bitter laugh that curdled into a hiss. "People always know, hun, but knowing don't save them. Knowing don't stop it." The diner creaked around them, its metal frame groaning like something alive. Claire's eyes flicked to the clock above the counter. The hands had frozen at midnight. They hadn't moved a second since. "What is this place?" Claire demanded. "Why does it happen here?" Sheriff Darnell stopped a foot from her table, leaning close enough that Claire could see the unnatural gleam in his eyes. "It's not the diner, it's the hunger. This land don't forgive, girl, it remembers. Blood was spilled here long before you or me, long before Evelyn, and blood calls to blood." Linda nodded slowly, her lips curling into a smile that didn't belong on her face. "Every night it takes its share, and every night we make sure it's fed." Claire's stomach dropped. "You knew. You both knew what would happen." The sheriff's expression hardened. "Course we knew. We're still here, ain't we? Someone's gotta guide it. Someone's gotta stay behind to clean up after." The realization hit Claire like ice water. They weren't victims, they were caretakers, gatekeepers, servants to whatever force devoured the diner's guests at midnight. Her hands shook as she raised her phone higher. "Why me? Why didn't it take me too?" For the first time, Linda's smile faltered. She glanced at the sheriff, something uncertain flickering across her inhuman face. "She ain't like the others," the sheriff muttered. His voice was almost resentful. "It don't want her yet." Claire's heart thundered in her chest. "Then I can leave," she whispered. "No," Linda said firmly, stepping between Claire and the door. "You can't just walk away, hun. Once you've seen it, you belong to it, whether you like it or not." The air thickened, pressing down on Claire like invisible hands. The walls of the diner seemed closer, the lights dimmer. The neon sign outside buzzed and sputtered, throwing the word "eat" across the window in jagged red letters. Claire backed into her booth, her mind racing. She couldn't fight them. She couldn't reason with them, but maybe she could stall. "Tell me," she said quickly, forcing her voice to steady. "Tell me everything. If I'm stuck here, at least let me know what I'm a part of." Linda tilted her head, studying her. Then slowly, she slid into the booth across from Claire. Her hands folded neatly on the table, though her nails looked too sharp in the dim light. "It started long before the diner," Linda said softly. "This land was stained in blood long before Evelyn put her name on it. Settlers, tribes, soldiers, they all fought and killed and died here. They left pieces of themselves behind. Fear, pain, Hunger. Those things don't just vanish, hun. They sink into the ground, and sometimes the ground starts wanting more. Sheriff Darnell stood at her shoulder, his arms crossed. Evelyn thought she was just running a diner, but the land had other plans. Midnight came and the first customers disappeared. She tried to fight it, tried to close the place down. Didn't matter. The hunger don't stop, it just takes, and it left her behind to serve it. Linda's eyes softened, almost pitying. That's how it works. Every generation, it leaves a few behind. To pour the coffee, to watch the clock, to make sure new folks sit down when the time comes. Claire's skin crawled. So you're saying you're trapped here, forever? Linda's smile returned, sharper now. Not forever, hun. Just until it finds someone else to take our place. The sheriff leaned closer, his breath cold against Claire's ear. And maybe it's already chosen. Claire's chest seized. She bolted from the booth, stumbling toward the door. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the lock. But before she could twist it, Linda was there, impossibly fast, her fingers closing around Claire's wrist with inhuman strength. You leave now, Linda hissed, her face inches away, and it'll follow you. It don't care where you run. Midnight always comes. Claire yanked free, her wrist burning where Linda's fingers had touched. She staggered back, slamming into a stool at the counter. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor, still recording. The sheriff bent down and picked it up, his glowing eyes reflecting in the screen. Best put this away. Ain't nobody out there wants to hear the truth. They wouldn't believe it even if they saw it. He slipped the phone into his pocket. Claire's mind spun. She couldn't fight them, couldn't leave. But maybe she could survive until morning. Where do they go? She whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the hum of the neon sign. All the people who vanish, where do they go? Linda's expression darkened. You don't want to know, hun. But Claire did want to know. More than anything, if she was going to survive this, she had to know what she was up against. The sheriff sighed, his gaze heavy with something like sorrow. They don't go nowhere, they become part of it. Their lives, their souls, their screams, it all feeds the hunger. That's what keeps this place standin'. That's why it never dies. The diner groaned again, louder this time, like something massive shifted beneath its foundation. Claire's stomach twisted. The air smelled faintly of rot, of wet earth. Linda glanced at the clock, still frozen at midnight. It ain't done with us yet, she murmured. Not tonight. The sheriff's hand drifted to his holster. We'll need to take her downstairs. Claire's blood ran cold. Downstairs! Neither of them answered. Linda grabbed her by the arm, pulling her toward a door behind the counter marked staff only. The sheriff followed, his heavy footsteps echoing. Claire thrashed, kicking, but their grip was like iron. The diner's fluorescent lights flickered wildly, casting long, warped shadows across the floor. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Claire's screams echoed in the empty diner as they dragged her below. Claire's heels scraped against the linoleum as Linda and Sheriff Darnell dragged her toward the narrow door. She fought, nails clawing at the frame, shoes skidding against the floor, but their grip was unshakable, like iron forged by something older than flesh. The smell hit her first, damp earth, mildew, and something metallic, like old blood. The door creaked open with a groan that echoed in her bones, revealing a staircase that looked far too old to belong to a 1950s diner. The wood was blackened, splintered, warped by years of rot, and the shadows below seemed to writhe as though they were alive. No, no, let me go, Claire screamed, her voice cracking. But Linda only hissed, her face stretched into that unnatural smile. "Downstairs, hun, always downstairs." The sheriff shoved her forward. Claire stumbled, tumbling down the first few steps before she caught herself on the railing. The wood felt slimy beneath her fingers, coated in something sticky. She pulled her hand back, and even in the dim light she could see the faint smear of red. Blood. Old, dried, but unmistakable. The staircase stretched downward farther than it should have. She descended carefully, every creak beneath her shoes echoing into the darkness. The deeper she went, the less the diner above seemed to exist, until the sounds of the world, buzzing neon, creaking walls, even her own shallow breaths, faded into a heavy silence. Finally, she reached the bottom. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, its chains swaying though there was no breeze. The light flickered, illuminating a room that should not have existed beneath a small-town diner. It was vast, too vast, its stone walls curving into a tunnel that seemed to stretch endlessly into blackness. And the walls were covered in carvings. Symbols gouged deep into the stone, some resembling crude stick figures, others geometric patterns that seemed to shift if she looked too long. Her stomach churned as she realized some of the grooves were filled with dried blood, dark and flaking. What is this place?" Claire whispered. Linda's voice floated from behind her, almost reverent. "It's where the hunger lives." The sheriff's boots thudded against the dirt floor as he stepped past her, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Don't dawdle, it don't like to wait." Claire hugged herself, trembling as she followed. The air was colder here, damp against her skin. Every step echoed too loud, bouncing back from the tunnel walls like mocking laughter. The further they went, the more she noticed the floor wasn't dirt at all. It was packed down bones. Tiny fragments crunched beneath her sneakers, white and brittle. She tried not to look, but once she realized she couldn't unsee it. Skulls, shattered ribs, femurs worn smooth as river stones, all ground into the earth beneath her. Her breath caught in her throat. All the people who vanished, this is where they ended up. The sheriff's flashlight beam cut across a massive archway up ahead. Beyond it, the tunnel widened into a cavern. The ceiling loomed impossibly high, stalactites dripping with moisture. But what drew Claire's eyes was the pit in the center of the room. A yawning black hole, ringed with stone, its depths bottomless. The air that rose from it was warm and foul, reeking of rot and sulfur. And it breathed, she swore it did, the sound of a slow inhale, then a rattling exhale that shook the dust from the walls. Linda bowed her head toward it, murmuring something Claire couldn't understand. The sheriff lowered himself to one knee, his voice rumbling in a prayer-like cadence. Claire's heart pounded as she stumbled backward. "What the hell is that?" "The mouth," Linda whispered. Her eyes glowed faintly in the flickering light. "The place where it feeds." Claire stared into the pit. The darkness seemed alive, shifting and rippling like ink dropped in water. Shapes writhed just beneath the surface of the shadows, arms, faces, mouths opening in silent screams before dissolving back into the void. Her stomach lurched. She could see them, the missing people, the diner's victims, trapped in the hunger, swallowed but not gone. Their agony clung to the air like smoke. Linda stepped closer, her smile almost tender. "Every night, hun, midnight comes and the mouth takes what it's owed. That's the price, that's the bargain." Claire shook her head violently. "This is insane." "You're insane, you're feeding it people." The sheriff stood, his face carved in shadow. "We don't feed it. It takes what it wants. Always has, always will. We just make sure the diner's doors are open when the hour strikes." Claire backed toward the wall, her hands scraping against the cold stone. Her mind raced, searching for any way out, any crack of escape. But then she saw something, a faint glimmer half hidden behind one of the carved stones. A doorway. Narrow, low, but real. Her pulse quickened. If she could just get to it, the pit exhaled. A deep, guttural sound like the growl of something immense. The walls vibrated, the light bulb above swinging wildly. Claire cried out, covering her ears as the symbols on the walls seemed to writhe, glowing faintly red. Linda dropped to her knees, chanting louder. The sheriff held his flashlight steady, though his hands shook. And then Claire heard it, a voice, rising from the pit. "Hungry," it moaned, 1,000 voices layered into one. "Hungry," her knees buckled. The sound wasn't just in her ears, it was inside her head, gnawing at her thoughts, filling her skull until she thought it would split apart. She screamed, but the voice swallowed her cry whole. The sheriff glanced at her, his expression grim. "It wants you to see, girl, wants you to know what comes next." Claire shook her head violently. "No, I'm not part of this. I won't be part of this." She turned, sprinting toward the hidden doorway. Her sneakers skidded across bone fragments, nearly sending her sprawling, but she forced herself forward. She shoved at the stone, desperate, praying it would move. It shifted. A crack of cool air spilled through. She could see beyond, another tunnel darker but open. And then hands shot from the shadows, gripping her arms. Claire screamed as skeletal fingers, cold and wet, pulled at her skin. Faces pressed through the stone itself, mouths opening wide in soundless shrieks. The wall was alive, and it didn't want her to leave. The sheriff's flashlight beam cut across her face as he shouted, "Stop fighting it. The more you fight, the harder it holds." But Claire thrashed, kicking wildly. The stone wall groaned, its faces contorting, and with a final wrench she tore herself free. She stumbled through the doorway, tumbling into the tunnel beyond. Behind her, Linda shrieked, a sound too high, too sharp to be human. "You can't run, hun. Midnight always finds you." Claire scrambled to her feet, sprinting into the darkness, her lungs burning, her heart slamming against her ribs. The tunnel twisted and turned, every shadow shifting like it wanted to swallow her whole. But she didn't stop. She couldn't, because now she knew the truth. And if she didn't escape, if she didn't tell the world, she would be just another voice in the hunger's endless pit. The storm outside roared like a furious beast clawing against the diner's walls, and inside, the air felt thick enough to choke on. Emma's flashlight beam quivered as she gripped it tighter, the light flickering against the glossy, untouched pies and steaming plates of food that had somehow appeared on every table. The impossible banquet stretched the length of the diner, bowls of chili still steaming, fries glistening with fresh oil, hamburgers bleeding grease onto paper wrappers. All of it impossibly warm, impossibly fresh. It was as if the vanished customers had simply stepped away mid-bite, and the diner itself had decided to prepare another round, waiting for new mouths to feed. Jack wiped sweat from his brow, though the air wasn't hot. It was heavy, suffocating. This wasn't here when we came in." "No," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "It's like the diner wants us to sit down, like it's setting the table." Maya edged toward the counter, her eyes darting across the room. "Or maybe they're still here, invisible, eating beside us." As if on cue, the sound of cutlery scraping plates echoed through the diner, though none of them moved. The noise came from all around, the jingle of spoons stirring coffee, the crunch of bacon breaking, the slurp of milkshakes being drained through paper straws. Yet the booths were empty except for the shadows, and those shadows were moving. Emma swung her flashlight toward the corner booth, and for a fraction of a second she thought she saw them. The outlines of people, pale and transparent, bent over their meals. But when the light hit, the booth was empty again. Only the half-eaten food remained. "Don't look directly," Maya hissed. I think they don't like the light." As if answering her, the bulbs above them flickered violently, buzzing with static. One after another, they popped out, plunging sections of the diner into deeper shadow. Emma's beam struggled against the sudden dark, and for the first time, she caught sight of what the diner was really hiding. The shadows weren't random shapes anymore. They were human silhouettes, men in cowboy hats, women in floral dresses, children clutching toys. Dozens of them, filling every booth, lining the counter stools, their faces twisted into grotesque, hollow smiles. Their mouths opened wide, chewing noiselessly, swallowing endlessly, their jaws unhinging far too wide for their heads. Jack stumbled back, nearly tripping over a chair. No, no, no. This isn't possible. They're the customers, Emma finished, her stomach sinking. The ones who vanish every night, they never left. They've been here the whole time, trapped. The shadows moved in perfect synchronization, raising invisible forks, sipping invisible coffee. And then, as if sensing new prey, their heads turned slowly toward Emma, Jack, and Maya. "Run!" Emma breathed. But before they could move, the doors to the diner slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows. The shadows began to rise, sliding out of the booths, their bodies stretching unnaturally tall as they loomed over the three survivors. The air filled with the sound of gnashing teeth, though no flesh or food was there. Maya clutched her cross necklace, muttering prayers under her breath, but even she couldn't look away when one of the figures passed directly through the counter. Its head tilted, jaw cracking open to reveal an endless abyss, not a mouth but a void of writhing darkness. The diner vibrated, plates shattering, cups bursting into shards as the entity drew closer. Jack shoved a table into its path, but the shadow slipped right through the obstacle. Desperation kicked in, and Emma yanked him by the arm toward the kitchen. "Go, back door, there has to be one." The trio bolted behind the counter, knocking over trays of untouched pies, the sickly sweet smell of cherries and cream mixing with the stench of rot. They burst into the kitchen, where the stoves blazed with fire, frying pans sizzling, yet no one was cooking. Invisible hands flipped burgers, stirred soup, kneaded dough on flour-dusted counters. The utensils moved in jerky, unnatural rhythm, like puppets pulled by unseen strings. "This place is alive," Jack panted. "It's feeding itself." Emma's flashlight beam hit the far wall where a door stood half open. The back exit. Freedom, but as they pushed forward, the kitchen itself rebelled. Knives lifted off the counters and flung toward them, embedding into walls just inches away. Pots toppled, spilling boiling soup across the tiled floor, forcing them to leap over puddles of scalding liquid. A meat grinder roared to life on its own, the metallic whine echoing like a scream. Maya let out a sharp cry as a carving knife grazed her arm, drawing blood. The smell of iron filled the air, and instantly the shadows in the doorway froze, their hollow eyes fixating on the wound. The diner pulsed, the fluorescent lights strobing faster, and for the first time Emma realized the truth. "They don't just want food," she said hoarsely. "They want us, our flesh, our blood." The shadows surged forward, and Emma shoved Maya and Jack through the back door just as another wave of knives clattered against the wall where they'd been standing. They spilled into the stormy night, the rain pouring like bullets against their skin. The parking lot stretched ahead, cars still sitting with doors ajar, plates of food left untouched inside them. "Get to the truck!" Jack shouted, pointing toward a rusted pickup at the edge of the lot. They sprinted across the slick pavement, shadows spilling out of the diner after them, moving faster now, their bodies stretching across the rain-soaked asphalt. Emma risked one glance back and wished she hadn't. The diner itself was changing. Its walls seemed to breathe, its neon sign flickering into twisted words. "Open forever." They piled into the truck, Jack fumbling with the keys he had snatched from a hook inside. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. Tires screeched as they sped down the desolate highway, the diner shrinking behind them, yet its sign still visible in the distance, glowing through the storm like a watchful eye. Emma slumped in the passenger seat, drenched and trembling. "We got out," she whispered, but her relief faltered when Maya lifted her hand. Blood still dripped from the cut on her arm, and in the dim glow of the dashboard, Emma swore she saw something moving beneath the skin, tiny tendrils of shadow writhing just below the surface. Maya's eyes widened, her voice breaking. I don't feel right." The storm howled louder, drowning the road ahead, and for the first time Emma understood. Escaping the diner was only part of the nightmare. Something had followed them. Something hungry, and the night was far from over. The pickup tore through the rain-slick highway, its tires hissing against the endless blacktop. Every few seconds, the headlights caught glimpses of skeletal trees and abandoned gas stations. But no matter how far they drove, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the diner's glow still clung to the horizon like a malignant star. Jack's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his eyes locked on the road ahead. "We just have to keep going," he muttered like a prayer. "Put miles between us and that hellhole." But Emma's gaze was fixed on Maya in the back seat. Her friend leaned against the window, her face pale, her breath shallow. The cut on her arm, which should have been a simple gash, was darkening. The veins around it pulsed with inky blackness, as if her blood itself was rotting. "Maya," Emma whispered, leaning closer. Maya's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, pupils dilating unnaturally wide. "It's still inside me." Her voice was barely audible over the rain. "I can hear it whispering. It wants me to go back. It wants all of us to go back." Jack cursed under his breath. "No one's going back, we're done." But even as he said it, the truck stuttered. The engine coughed, sputtered, then died completely, leaving them stranded on the empty highway. The headlights dimmed, swallowed by the storm. For a moment, the only sound was rain hammering the roof. "Don't tell me we're out of gas," Emma snapped, panic clawing at her throat. Jack hit the dashboard in frustration. "Tank's half full." I don't know what happened." And then Emma saw it, the diner's neon glow blooming in the side mirror. They hadn't driven away from it at all. Somehow, impossibly, the world had looped them back. The neon sign flickered through the rain, closer now than before. "Welcome back." "No," Emma whispered, her stomach twisting. "It won't let us leave." A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the truck's frame. The smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee seeped into the cab, so strong it made Emma gag. And then, in the distance, through the storm, figures emerged, dark silhouettes walking toward them. Not rushing, not attacking, just calmly approaching as if the three of them had already been seated at their table. Maya stirred, a grotesque smile twisting her lips. "They're waiting. Midnight's almost here. It's time for the feast." Emma's heart pounded as she shook her friend, desperate to keep her awake, to keep her human. "Fight it, Maya. Don't let them take you." But Maya's body convulsed. Her eyes rolled back, and her skin rippled as shadowy tendrils writhed beneath her flesh. Her mouth opened unnaturally wide, a guttural voice echoing from deep inside her chest. Hungry? Jack flung open his door, dragging Emma out into the storm. We run! Now! They stumbled across the slick highway, their shoes splashing through puddles. Behind them, the diner's glow expanded, its walls stretching taller, its neon sign bending into grotesque shapes that no human language could form. The building was no longer a diner. It was alive, a massive organism pulsing with hunger, its windows gaping like open mouths. The shadows marched closer, their faces faintly familiar now. Emma recognized them. The old man she'd seen earlier, the trucker who had smiled at her, the waitress in her blood-red uniform. All of them transparent now, their eyes empty, their jaws working ceaselessly as they chewed on nothing. Jack pulled Emma toward a ditch off the highway, ducking into the tall grass for cover. His breath came fast and ragged. We can't outrun it, we have to end it. Emma shook her head violently. How? You can't kill something that isn't alive. But Jack's expression hardened. That place feeds on us, on our fear, our flesh. Maybe if we burn it, we can cut it off. Before Emma could protest, Maya's scream tore through the night. She was no longer in the truck. Somehow, she was already back at the diner's threshold, her body pulled forward by invisible strings. The shadows encircled her like mourners around a grave, their whispering voices rising in unison. Emma's chest clenched. We can't leave her. Jack grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. She's gone, you saw it. That thing inside her, it's part of them now. But Emma couldn't accept it. She tore away from him, sprinting toward the diner, her flashlight bouncing wildly. She didn't care if it was suicide. She wouldn't let her best friend be devoured alone. The closer she got, the stronger the smells became. Grease, sugar, smoke. It overwhelmed her senses, pulling her forward like a hook in her chest. The diner's door creaked open on its own, and inside she saw them all. Dozens of shadow customers sitting at their booths, their heads turning in unison to stare at her. And in the center, on a plate like the main course, lay Maya, her chest rising and falling weakly, her skin already translucent. Emma charged forward, tears stinging her eyes. She grabbed Maya's hand, but the second she touched her, cold fire surged through her body. Voices screamed in her skull, hundreds of them, all chanting the same word, "Eat, eat, eat." Emma fell to her knees, clutching her head. The shadows leaned closer, jaws yawning open, tongues of black smoke unfurling toward her. For a moment, she thought she was lost, that she'd be another face in the diner's endless feast. And then, boom! The back wall of the diner erupted in flame. Jack stood in the doorway, a gas can in one hand, a lit match in the other. The fire spread fast, climbing up the greasy walls, igniting curtains, leaping from booth to booth. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from the blaze, their forms flickering like dying film projections. "Emma, get out!" Jack roared over the crackle of fire. Summoning every ounce of strength, Emma dragged Maya's limp body toward the exit. The flames closed in, the roof groaning, the windows bursting into shards. The shadows screamed, their hollow faces melting in the inferno, their feast finally ending. Emma and Jack burst into the storm, collapsing onto the wet asphalt with Maya between them. Behind them, the diner burned like a beacon, flames clawing into the sky. For the first time that night, the neon sign went dark. They sat there, gasping, soaked, trembling. Jack's eyes searched Emma's. "Did we do it? Is it over?" Emma looked down at Maya, whose chest still rose faintly. For a moment, relief washed over her until she noticed it. A faint red glow like embers beneath Maya's skin. The shadows weren't gone. They had simply moved to a new host. And as thunder rolled across the Texas night, Maya's lips curled into a smile that wasn't her own. The diner was gone, but its hunger would never end.